The coffee machine hissed behind me, steam curling against my cheek as I wiped down the marble counter for what felt like the 100th time that morning. My fingers ached from the cold water, knuckles red and raw, but I kept scrubbing. The cafe was nearly empty, just 2 elderly women by the window and a businessman typing furiously on his laptop. Peak hour had passed, leaving behind the debris of rushed mornings. Crumpled napkins, lipstick-stained cups, spilled sugar that crunched under my worn sneakers. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, feeling the grease that came from standing too close to the espresso machine all day. My reflection in the steel backsplash showed exactly what I'd become. Invisible, just another girl in a stained apron, dark circles under her eyes, existing in the background of other people's important lives. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately. Why would I? It was just another customer, another order, another few dollars closer to making rent. My manager, Rita, was in the back doing inventory, which meant I had to handle the front alone. I grabbed a clean cup, positioning myself at the register, rehearsing the same greeting I'd given 1,000 times. Welcome to Rosewood Café. What can I... The words died in my throat. He stood in the doorway, and the entire world seemed to tilt sideways. 7 years collapsed into nothing. 7 years of trying to forget, of building walls, of convincing myself that first love was just a foolish memory best left buried. Dante. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my lips. He looked different. Sharper, harder, like someone had taken the boy I'd known and carved away everything soft until only edges remained. His dark hair was shorter now, styled with precision rather than the messy curls I used to run my fingers through. The leather jacket he wore probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. But his eyes... God, his eyes were exactly the same. Deep brown, almost black, with that intensity that used to make me feel like I was the only person in the universe. Those eyes found mine across the cafe, and I watched something flicker in them, recognition, then something else I couldn't name. My hands trembled against the counter. The cup I'd been holding slipped from my fingers, clattering against the tile floor, but miraculously not breaking. The sound echoed through the quiet space, and heat flooded my cheeks. Sorry, I bent down quickly to retrieve it, grateful for the excuse to hide my face, to catch my breath, to remember how to be a functional human being. When I straightened, he was closer. Much closer. He'd crossed half the cafe in the seconds I'd been crouched behind the counter, moving with a predatory grace that sent warning signals firing through my nervous system. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him at a respectful distance, both wearing dark suits that screamed money and menace. One of them had a scar running down his jaw. The other kept his hand near his waistband in a way that made my stomach clench. But I couldn't focus on them. All I could see was Dante, standing 3 feet away, studying me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Mia. My name and his voice after all these years felt like a physical touch. Deep, rough, with an edge of something dangerous underneath. I thought it was you. The coffee machine hissed again, filling the silence I couldn't break. My mouth had gone completely dry. Up close, I could see more changes. A thin scar along his left cheekbone, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way he carried himself with absolute certainty. This wasn't the struggling artist who used to paint me in his tiny apartment. This was someone who owned rooms just by walking into them. Dante. His name felt strange on my tongue, like speaking a language I'd forgotten. What are you doing here? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Getting coffee. What are you doing here? The question landed like an accusation, and I felt myself shrinking, hyper-aware of my stained apron, my chipped nail polish, the smell of old coffee grounds that probably clung to my clothes. I work here. Something dark passed across his face. His gaze swept over me, the uniform, my tired eyes, my raw hands still clutching the counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. When his eyes met mine again, there was anger there. Not at me, but simmering just beneath the surface, directed at something I couldn't see. Alone? The single word carried weight I didn't understand. My manager's in the back, I said, confused by the question. What? I meant in life. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Leather and smoke and danger. "Are you alone, Mia?" The question felt loaded, like answering wrong might trigger something irreversible. My heart hammered against my ribs. This close, I could see the way his jaw clenched, the tension in his shoulders beneath that pristine jacket. One of his men shifted near the door, and I noticed him checking the street outside through the window. "I don't understand what you're asking," I whispered. Dante's hand rose, and I flinched before I could stop myself. The movement was minute, barely noticeable, but his eyes darkened at my reaction. His hand continued its path slowly, deliberately, until his fingers brushed a strand of hair away from my face. The touch was gentle, reverent even, but I felt trapped by it, pinned in place by the weight of his attention. "You're shaking," he observed quietly. "You're scaring me." The honesty escaped before I could censor it. His hand dropped immediately, and he took a measured step back, though his eyes never left my face. "I never wanted to scare you, Angel." The old nickname hit me like a punch to the gut. "I just need to know. Is there someone? A husband? Boyfriend? Why does it matter?" I tried to sound defiant, but my voice came out small. "It matters." The words were soft, but absolute. Final. Behind him, one of his men murmured something in Italian. Dante responded without looking away from me, his tone sharp and dismissive. The man fell silent immediately, and I realized with growing unease that these weren't friends or business associates. They were subordinates, people who feared him. What had happened to the boy who used to recite poetry while we watched sunrises from his fire escape? "There's no one," I heard myself say, though every instinct screamed that I should lie, should invent a fictional boyfriend, should build any barrier between myself and whatever this had become. But Dante, what? The door chimed again, and a group of college students tumbled in, laughing and loud. The spell broke. Dante glanced at them with barely concealed irritation, and one of his men immediately moved to intercept them, positioning himself to block their view of us. "You still drink your coffee black?" I asked stupidly, desperately trying to regain some normalcy, to pretend this was just a chance encounter between old friends and not something that felt increasingly like a trap closing around me. "I remember how you take yours," he said instead of answering. "2 sugars, extra cream, cinnamon on top. You used to say it tasted like Christmas morning." The fact that he remembered such a small detail after 7 years made my chest ache. "You have a good memory. For some things." His gaze intensified. "For you, I remember everything." The words should have been romantic. Instead, they felt like a promise, or a threat. Rita's voice called from the back, asking if I needed help. I broke eye contact with Dante long enough to assure her I was fine, and when I looked back, he was pulling out a wallet, thick black leather, the kind that probably held more cash than I made in a month. "I'll take an espresso, and whatever you want." "I'm working," I protested weakly. "Take a break." It wasn't a suggestion. "I can't just..." "Please." The single word stopped me cold. There was something raw in it, something vulnerable beneath all that controlled power. 5 minutes, Mia. That's all I'm asking." But even as I nodded, even as I made his espresso with shaking hands and poured myself the coffee I couldn't afford on my wages, I knew it was a lie. Men like what Dante had become didn't ask for 5 minutes. They took everything. I led him to a corner table, away from the windows, though I noticed his men positioned themselves strategically, one by the door, one where he could watch both entrances. The college students had been quietly ushered to the opposite side of the café, though I hadn't seen it happen. We sat across from each other, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. I wrapped my hands around my cup, grateful for the warmth, for something to do with my trembling fingers. "You disappeared," I finally said, the accusation I'd held for 7 years spilling out. "No call, no letter, nothing. I went to your apartment and someone else was living there. I thought you were dead." Pain flashed across his face, genuine and deep. "I had to leave. It wasn't safe." He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Things happened that I can't explain. Not yet, but I looked for you, Mia. I never stopped looking. I've been here the whole time." Bitterness crept into my voice. Same city, same neighborhood practically. I wasn't hiding. You moved. His response was immediate, precise. 3 months after I left, you moved from Riverside to Oakmont. Then 2 years ago to your current apartment on 7th Street, above the laundromat. Ice flooded my veins. How do you know where I live? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to examine. Dante leaned back in his chair, and for the first time I saw the predator clearly. The boy was gone entirely. In his place sat a man who knew where I lived, who probably knew far more than that, who had been watching from the shadows, while I stumbled through life thinking I was alone. I make it my business to know things, he said quietly, especially things that matter to me. I'm not a thing. My voice shook with anger now, overpowering the fear. You can't just vanish for 7 years and then show up and what? Stalk me? Protect you. The correction was instant and fierce. I've been protecting you. From what? I demanded. But even as I asked, pieces were clicking together. The expensive clothes, the bodyguards, the way he moved through space like violence was always one breath away. Dante, what did you become? His phone buzzed on the table, the first of 3 phones I now noticed lined up in front of him. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and typed a rapid response before looking back at me. Someone who can finally take care of you the way I always wanted to. The answer was smooth, practiced, revealing nothing. I tried a different approach. Do you paint anymore? This question landed. I watched him flinch, something human breaking through the carefully constructed armor. No, not in a long time. That's sad. I meant it. His art had been beautiful, raw, full of feeling. You were talented. I had to grow up. The words were harsh, aimed at himself more than me. Talent doesn't pay for protection, doesn't keep people safe, doesn't... He stopped abruptly, that iron control slamming back into place. But I'd seen behind the curtain whatever had happened to transform sweet, artistic Dante into this controlled, dangerous man. It haunted him. The ghosts lived behind his eyes. Rita appeared at my elbow, making me jump. Mia, honey, you've got tables backing up. I glanced at the counter and saw she was right. While I'd been lost in Dante's orbit, the lunch rush had begun creeping in. I stood quickly, relieved to have an escape. I have to work. Dante stood with me, and I was struck again by how much taller he seemed, how his presence filled space in a way it never used to. When do you finish? Not until 6. I'll wait. That's 5 hours from now, I said incredulously. I'll wait. Each word was deliberate, final. You can't just sit here for 5 hours. I'll handle Rita. He pulled out his wallet again, extracting several large bills and setting them on the table, for the table rental and any inconvenience. I looked at the money, easily $200, and felt sick. Dante, no, this is crazy. You can't. His hand closed over mine, warm and strong, and I froze. The touch sent electricity racing up my arm, treacherous muscle memory awakening after years of dormancy. His thumb stroked across my knuckles, gentle and possessive all at once. Go work, Angel. I'll be right here when you're done. We have 7 years to catch up on. His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering, and this time, I'm not disappearing. Neither are you. It sounded like a vow. It felt like a cage door closing. I pulled my hand away and fled back to the counter, my heart racing, his eyes burning into my back. For the next 5 hours, I was hyper-aware of him in that corner booth, never looking at his phone, never speaking to his men, just watching me with the patient focus of a hunter who'd finally found his prey. And when I accidentally dropped a tray of dishes in my nervousness, the crash echoing through the café, and looked up to find those dark eyes on me filled with something between concern and possession, I realized my innocent mistake of glancing up when he'd walked in had triggered something irreversible. Dante hadn't stumbled into this café by chance. He'd been searching. And now that he'd found me, the look on his face made one thing terrifyingly clear. He had no intention of ever letting me disappear again. The last customer finally left at 6:15, and I untied my apron with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. Rita had been shooting me curious glances all afternoon, her eyes darting between me and the corner booth where Dante sat like a dark king holding court. He hadn't moved except to accept coffee refills I brought with shaking hands, and to make occasional phone calls in Italian that sounded like commands. His men had rotated shifts, the scarred one leaving around 2, replaced by someone younger with cold eyes and a permanent scowl. They never sat, never relaxed, just stood guard like Dante was royalty requiring constant protection. From what? From who? The questions circled my mind endlessly as I wiped down tables, served customers, pretended everything was normal, while my entire world tilted on its axis. "That your boyfriend?" Rita asked, as I counted out my register, her voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "No, just someone I used to know. Someone you used to know doesn't look at you like that, honey." She patted my shoulder, her voice gentle. "Be careful. That man looks like trouble wrapped in expensive packaging." She had no idea how right she was. I finished my closing duties, dragging them out as long as possible. But eventually there was nothing left to clean, no excuse to delay the inevitable. Dante remained in his booth, watching me with that unnerving patience. While his guard stood sentinel by the door, Rita locked up the back and gave me one last concerned look before leaving through the rear entrance. The cafe fell quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and my own thundering heartbeat. "Ready?" Dante stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. For what exactly? I stayed behind the counter, using it as a barrier between us. "Dinner. Conversation." He moved toward me slowly, deliberately. "Answers to all those questions I can see running through your mind. I'm not hungry." A lie. I'd skipped lunch, unable to eat with my stomach in knots. Mia. He stopped on the other side of the counter, close enough that I could smell his cologne again. "Don't make this difficult." "I'm not making anything difficult. I'm just saying no." I forced steel into my voice. "You can't just show up after 7 years and expect me to drop everything because you want dinner." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Can't?" The single word carried enough threat to make me step back involuntarily. His guard moved closer to the counter, hand shifting toward his waistband, and I realized with cold clarity that these men would do whatever Dante ordered. Whatever he wanted, he got. But then Dante held up a hand, stopping his guard mid-motion. He took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice had softened. "You're right. I'm sorry." The apology sounded rusty, like he wasn't used to giving them. I'm not good at asking anymore. I'm used to telling." "I noticed," I said quietly. "Have dinner with me, please." He tried again, and I could see the effort it took him to make it a request rather than a command. "One meal, Mia. If you want to walk away after that, I won't stop you." Another lie. I could see it in his eyes, in the set of his shoulders, in the possessive way he looked at me like I was something precious he'd lost and found again. Men like Dante, whatever he'd become, didn't let go of things they wanted. But I also saw something else. Beneath the danger, beneath the control, there was a desperation I recognized. The same desperation I'd felt 7 years ago when I'd searched every hospital, every morgue, every corner of this city trying to find him. "One meal," I agreed, and watched relief flood his features. "But somewhere public, and you answer my questions honestly." "Deal." He extended his hand across the counter. I looked at it, remembering how that hand used to hold mine while we walked through parks, how his fingers used to trace my face while he memorized me for his paintings. Now it was adorned with an expensive watch and a ring I didn't recognize, thick gold with some kind of crest. I shook his hand quickly, trying to ignore the way my skin burned at the contact, trying to forget how perfectly my hand had always fit in his. His fingers tightened briefly before releasing me. "My car is outside. I can meet you somewhere," I countered. "Mia." Patient, but firm. "It's not safe for you to travel alone at night." "I do it every night. I'm fine." "You won't anymore." The statement was absolute, leaving no room for argument. "Not now that I've found you." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, some traitorous part of my heart fluttered at being claimed so thoroughly. I squashed the feeling immediately. "One dinner, Dante. That doesn't give you the right to dictate my life." "We'll see." He moved around the counter with fluid grace, and suddenly he was in my space, close enough to touch. His hand rose to my face, cupping my cheek with surprising gentleness. I've waited 7 years to have you this close again. Forgive me if I'm not ready to let you out of my sight. My breath caught. This close, I could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could remember with painful clarity how it felt to be held by him, kissed by him, loved by him. What happened to you? I whispered. Life. His thumb stroked my cheekbone. War. Survival. But we'll talk about that over dinner. Come. He took my hand, lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world, and led me toward the door. His guard opened it, scanning the street before nodding. Another man I hadn't noticed before stood beside a black SUV with tinted windows, parked directly in front of the café despite the no parking zone. The vehicle was massive, intimidating, obviously armored based on how heavy the door looked when the guard opened it. The interior was all black leather and dark wood, with enough space to seat 6 comfortably. This is your car? I stared at it, then at him. One of them. He helped me inside with a hand on my lower back, proprietary and protective. I have different vehicles for different purposes. I wanted to ask what those purposes were, but my mouth had gone dry again. The interior smelled like leather and Dante's cologne, intoxicating and overwhelming. He slid in beside me, close enough that our thighs touched, while his guard took the front passenger seat and the driver pulled smoothly into traffic. Where are we going? I asked, hyper-aware of his proximity, of his hand resting possessively on my knee. Sorella. An exclusive Italian restaurant downtown that I'd only seen from the outside, the kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice and meals cost more than my weekly salary. I'm not dressed for somewhere like that. I looked down at my jeans and the t-shirt I'd worn under my apron, both stained and rumpled from a long shift. You're perfect. His hand squeezed my knee gently, and it's my restaurant. You could show up in rags and they'd treat you like a queen. Your restaurant. The words echoed in my mind. You own Sorella? Among other establishments. Vague. Evasive. What else do you own, Dante? His jaw tightened. This conversation is better had somewhere private. The car seems pretty private. Not private enough. His eyes flicked to the driver, then back to me. Trust me, Angel. Some things need to be said face to face, without witnesses. The endearment kept slipping out, natural as breathing, and each time it hit me like a physical blow. He'd called me Angel because he said I'd saved him from a darkness I never fully understood. Back then, I'd thought he meant depression, the struggle of being a starving artist. Now I wondered what demons had really been chasing him. We drove through the city as dusk settled over the buildings, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Dante's hand never left my knee, his touch burning through the denim, claiming me with casual possessiveness. I should have moved away. Instead, I sat frozen, caught between fear and something far more dangerous, hope. Hope that the boy I'd loved still existed somewhere inside this dangerous man. Hope that there was an explanation for his disappearance that would make the 7 years of grief make sense. Hope that I wasn't completely insane for sitting in this car, letting him touch me, following him into what was clearly a different world than the one I inhabited. You're thinking too loud, Dante murmured, his voice intimate in the enclosed space. You always said that. The memory escaped before I could stop it. You always did. His fingers traced small circles on my knee, hypnotic and maddening. I could always tell when your mind was running in circles. You'd get this little crease right here. He reached up with his free hand, touching the space between my eyebrows. And you'd chew your bottom lip. I released my lip immediately, not having realized I was doing it. 7 years and you remember that? I remember everything about you, Mia. Every expression, every gesture, every sound you make. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I told you. For you. I remember everything. The car pulled up to Sorella's entrance, where a valet immediately rushed to open the door. Dante exited first, then turned to help me out, his hand strong and steady. The moment we stepped onto the sidewalk, I felt eyes on us. The valet, the doorman, passers-by on the street. They all looked at Dante with a mixture of respect and fear. Who was he? The restaurant's interior was breathtaking, all warm lighting, marble floors, and that particular hush that came with extreme wealth. A woman in an elegant black dress approached immediately, her smile professionally warm until she saw Dante. Then it became genuine, though her eyes held unmistakable nervousness. "Mr. Caruso, we weren't expecting you this evening." Her accent was Italian, her posture deferential. "Last-minute decision, Julia. We'll take the private room upstairs." "Of course, right away." She snapped her fingers, and immediately 2 waiters appeared to escort us. "Anything for you, Mr. Caruso." We were led up a curved staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with original artwork, and into a room that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the city, a single table set for 2 in the center, candles already lit despite Dante's impromptu arrival. Fresh flowers, peonies my favorite, adorned the table. How did they know? I turned to him as the waiters retreated, closing the door behind them and leaving us alone. "I called ahead while you were closing the café." He pulled out my chair, waiting until I sat before taking his own seat across from me. "I remembered peonies were your favorite." Of course he did. He remembered everything. A waiter appeared with wine, expensive, Italian, poured without asking if we wanted it. Dante dismissed him with a subtle nod, and we were alone again, the silence stretching between us like a living thing. "Talk to me," I said finally. "No more evasions. What happened 7 years ago? Where did you go? And what are you now?" Dante took a slow sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving my face. When he set the glass down, his expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the war happening behind his eyes. What to reveal, what to hide, how much truth I could handle. 7 years ago my father died. The words were flat, emotionless. He was murdered by people he trusted, and I inherited his business. All of it. Your father. I trailed off, trying to remember what little Dante had told me about his family. You said he was dead. You said you didn't have any family. I lied. Simple, direct. My father was very much alive, and very much involved in activities that required I keep my distance from him, for my safety, and for the safety of anyone I cared about. My hands trembled as I reached for my wine glass. What kind of activities? The kind that get people killed. His gaze was steady, unflinching. My father was the head of the Caruso family. When he died, that responsibility fell to me. The Caruso family. The name echoed in my mind, triggering half-remembered news reports, whispered conversations, urban legends about organized crime in the city. The Caruso family controlled the docks, owned half the politicians, moved through society like sharks through water. "You're in the Mafia," the words came out as a whisper. "I am the Mafia." The correction was gentle, but absolute. "In this city, nothing happens without my permission. I control the ports, the unions, the flow of goods, legal and otherwise. I have judges in my pocket, police on my payroll, and enough political influence to make or break elections. I should have stood up. Should have run. Should have called the police, though according to him they worked for him anyway. Instead, I sat frozen, staring at the man I'd once loved, trying to reconcile the artist who'd painted me in sunrise colors with the criminal who'd just confessed to running an empire built on violence and corruption. "Say something," Dante said quietly, and for the first time since he'd walked into the cafe, he looked uncertain. "I don't know what to say." My voice came out small, scared. "You're a criminal." "Yes." No denial, no justification. "You hurt people. When necessary." His jaw clenched. "I protect my family, my territory, my interests. Sometimes that requires violence. I won't lie to you about that. And you want me to just, what, accept this? Have dinner and pretend you didn't just tell me you're a mobster? I want you to understand." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "I left to protect you, Mia. When my father died, there was a war. 5 families fighting for control, all of them willing to use any weakness against me. If they'd known about you, if they'd discovered what you meant to me, they would have taken you, hurt you, used you to get to me. So you just disappeared? For 7 years? Anger finally broke through my shock. You couldn't send a letter? Make a phone call? Every contact was a risk. Every connection was a potential weapon they could use. His hand reached across the table, but I pulled mine back. Pain flashed across his face. By the time I'd consolidated power, by the time it was safe, you'd moved, changed jobs. I spent 2 years tracking you down, Mia. 2 years of searching while you slipped through my fingers like smoke. I wasn't hiding. You weren't easy to find either. His voice held frustration, old and deep. You stopped using social media, paid for everything in cash, moved 3 times in 5 years. It was like you were a ghost, because I'd been trying to forget him, trying to erase every trace of the girl who'd loved Dante Caruso and lost him. I'd dismantled my digital life, my connections, everything that reminded me of who I used to be. I was trying to move on, I said quietly. Did you? The question was sharp, demanding. Did you move on, Mia? Did you find someone else? Fall in love? Build a life without me? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. He stood abruptly, moving around the table with predatory grace. Before I could react, he was crouching beside my chair, his hands gripping the armrests, caging me in. I've spent 7 years clawing my way to the top of a world I never wanted, building an empire on blood and fear, all so I could be strong enough to protect you, to find you, to keep you safe from the monsters I deal with every single day. His face was inches from mine, his breath warm against my skin, his eyes blazing with emotions I couldn't name. You want fair? His voice dropped to a whisper. Fair would have been dying in that alley with my father, taking a bullet meant for him. Fair would have been you finding someone kind and safe and normal, someone who could give you the life you deserve. But I'm not fair, Angel. I'm selfish and possessive, and I've committed sins that would make you sick if you knew the details. His hand rose to cup my face, and I was trapped between wanting to lean into the touch and wanting to run. But I'm also yours. I've always been yours. And now that I've found you again, now that I know you're alone and unprotected in this city full of people who would hurt you just to get to me, there's no force on earth that could make me walk away. You're scaring me again, I whispered. Good. His thumb traced my lower lip and I shivered. You should be scared, because I'm not the boy you knew, Mia. That boy died the same night my father did. What's left is something darker, something dangerous. But it's still yours if you'll have it. The confession hung between us, raw and honest, and terrifying in its intensity. This was a man confessing love like a disease, like a curse, like something he couldn't control even if he wanted to. And God help me. Some broken part of my heart responded to it. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted. Then don't decide tonight. He pressed his forehead against mine, his eyes closing briefly. Just stay. Have dinner with me. Let me prove I'm still worthy of your time, even if I'm no longer worthy of your love. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dante pulled back immediately, his expression shifting from vulnerable to controlled in a heartbeat. Enter. Waiters appeared with the first course, and Dante returned to his seat, the moment of raw honesty locked away behind his carefully constructed walls. But I'd seen behind them now. I'd glimpsed the boy I'd loved, still living somewhere inside the monster he'd become. And that glimpse terrified me more than anything else, because it meant I might not be strong enough to walk away. Dinner passed in a haze of exquisite food I barely tasted, and conversation that felt like dancing through a minefield. Dante asked about my life, careful questions about my jobs, my apartment, whether I was happy. I answered in fragments, hyper-aware that anything I revealed felt like handing him ammunition. But he already knew so much. The addresses, the job changes, probably more than he was admitting. The knowledge should have felt invasive, violating. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in 7 years. You're not eating, he observed, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. I looked down at my plate, some kind of pasta and truffle sauce that probably cost more than my daily wages, and realized I'd only managed a few bites. I'm still processing. That I'm a criminal? No judgment in his voice, just curiosity. That you're here. That you're real. I set down my fork, meeting his eyes. For 7 years you were a ghost. A memory I'd started to think I'd imagined. And now you're sitting across from me telling me you run the city's underworld like it's a normal career path. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It's not a career path I chose willingly. But you chose to stay. Did I? The smile faded. When you inherit an empire, Mia, walking away isn't an option. There are hundreds of people who depend on me. Families whose livelihoods come from businesses I control. And there are enemies who would see any weakness as an opportunity to take everything. So you're trapped. I said it gently, understanding dawning. We're all trapped by something. His gaze held mine. I'm trapped by duty and blood. You're trapped by whatever keeps you working yourself to exhaustion in a cafe, living in an apartment that barely qualifies as safe, struggling when you shouldn't have to struggle. Heat flushed my cheeks. I'm doing fine. You're surviving. That's not the same as living. He leaned back, wineglass in hand. When was the last time you bought yourself something frivolous? When did you last take a vacation? Sleep past dawn? Not everyone has Mafia money to throw around. I shot back, defensive. No, but you could. The words hung between us, weighted with implication. I laughed, but it came out bitter. What? You're offering to be my sugar daddy now? 7 years of silence and suddenly you want to fund my lifestyle? I want to take care of you. His voice was steady, serious. The way I should have been doing all along. You shouldn't be working double shifts, Mia. You shouldn't have dark circles under your eyes from exhaustion, or hands raw from scrubbing dishes or this. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing my wrist where my sleeve had ridden up, revealing a burn scar from the espresso machine. This should never have happened. I pulled my hand back. Accidents happen. It's part of working in a cafe. Not anymore. The finality in his tone made my stomach clench. Dante. I'm not asking, Angel. Soft words, iron underneath. Tomorrow you're done at that cafe. I'll handle Rita, compensate her for the short notice. You'll... Absolutely not. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. You don't get to waltz back into my life and start making decisions for me. I need that job. I have rent, bills, a life that exists whether you approve of it or not. He stood too, moving around the table with that predatory grace. You need that job because you have no other options. I'm offering you options. No, you're offering me a cage. I backed up, but there was nowhere to go. A gilded one maybe, but still a cage. You want to pay my bills, control my choices, keep me tucked away somewhere safe while you do whatever violent things you do. Would that be so terrible? He kept advancing, and I kept retreating until my back hit the window. Being protected? Cared for? Having someone who thinks about your safety, your comfort, your happiness? At what cost? I demanded. My independence? My self-respect? Becoming some mobster's kept woman? Pain flashed across his face, quick and sharp. You're not just some woman. You're everything. The confession stole my breath. He was close now. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Could see the rapid pulse at his throat that betrayed his controlled exterior. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. I don't know how to be near you without remembering everything we were, and I don't know how to look at you now and not see a stranger. Then let me show you. His hand rose slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he cupped my face with heartbreaking gentleness. Let me prove that underneath the suits and the violence and the empire, I'm still the man who loved you, who loves you still. Love isn't control, Dante. No. His thumb traced my cheekbone. But sometimes protection looks like it. My world is dangerous, Mia. The people I deal with, the enemies I've made, they wouldn't hesitate to use you against me. They'd hurt you in ways that would destroy us both, just to prove they could. And maybe we shouldn't do this. The words hurt coming out, but I forced them anyway. Maybe the smart thing is to walk away, let you go back to your world and me to mine. His jaw clenched, and for a moment I saw something feral flash in his eyes. I can't do that. You mean you won't? Same thing. His other hand came up, framing my face between his palms. I've spent 7 years in hell, building power brick by bloody brick, all for this moment. For the chance to keep you safe, to give you everything you deserve. You think I can just walk away now? You think I have that kind of strength? You're the head of a crime family. You have all the strength in the world. Not when it comes to you. The admission was raw, vulnerable. Never when it comes to you. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel him trembling. This powerful, dangerous man shaking like a leaf because I'd suggested we part ways. The knowledge did something to me, cracked open something I'd kept carefully locked away. I'm scared, I confessed. I know. His breath was warm against my lips. I'm scared too. Terrified that you'll see too much of the monster and forget the man, but I'm more terrified of losing you again. You never had me. Not really. We were kids playing at forever. We were real. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. We were the realest thing in my life, Mia. Everything else, the family, the business, the violence, that's the game. You were the truth. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the intensity of his gaze, but it didn't help. I could still feel him, overwhelming and all-consuming, a gravitational force I'd been orbiting for 7 years even in his absence. 1 month, I heard myself say. His hands tightened on my face. What? Give me 1 month. Let me see who you are now, not who you were. Let me decide if I can live in your world. I opened my eyes, meeting his. But I keep my job, my apartment, my independence. You don't get to sweep in and rearrange my life. Not yet. That's not negotiable. His voice hardened. Your safety is my decision. I cut him off. Those are my terms, Dante. 1 month of getting to know each other again, on my conditions. Or we end this right now. I watched him war with himself, need battling against the instinct to control, to protect, to possess. Finally, he took a shaking breath. 2 weeks at the café, then we discuss alternatives. He was compromising, barely. And I assigned security to watch your apartment. No security. Mia. No, security. I pushed against his chest, creating space between us. I won't live under surveillance. Either you trust me to be safe, or this doesn't work. His jaw clenched so tight I heard his teeth grind. There are people who would kill you just to hurt me. Then don't tell them about me. I met his eyes steadily. You kept me secret for 7 years. Keep doing it. It's not that simple anymore. People saw us leave together. By tomorrow, everyone will know you exist. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. I can't unring that bell, Angel. The endearment slipped out unconsciously, and I saw the moment he realized it. His eyes softened, and he looked suddenly younger, more like the boy I'd known. Please, he said quietly. Let me keep you safe. It's the only thing I'm asking. It's not, though. You're asking me to give up my entire life, to trust you completely when I barely know you anymore. I shook my head. I need time, Dante. Time to process this, to figure out if what we had can survive what you've become. He stared at me for a long moment, and I watched him struggle with the urge to simply override my objections, to take what he wanted and deal with the consequences later. But then something shifted in his expression. Okay. The word sounded like it cost him. 1 month. But you call me every night before bed so I know you're safe. And if anything feels wrong, you contact me immediately. It was still controlling, still possessive, but it was also a compromise, from a man who clearly wasn't used to compromising. Deal. I extended my hand, formal and slightly ridiculous given the intimacy of moments before. He looked at my hand, then back at my face, and smiled. A real smile that transformed his features, making him look almost like the boy I'd loved. Then he took my hand and pulled me against him instead, his arms wrapping around me in an embrace that felt like coming home and stepping into danger all at once. I missed you, he murmured into my hair, every single day. I let myself lean into him just for a moment, breathing in his scent and remembering how safe I used to feel in his arms. But safety was an illusion now. This man was a storm, and I was choosing to stand in the center of it. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes were dark with want, his control visibly fraying. Let me take you home. The drive back was quieter, tension humming between us like a live wire. His hand found mine in the darkness of the car, fingers lacing together, and I didn't pull away. When we pulled up outside my building, the shabby walk-up above the laundromat, I felt him tense. This is where you live? Disapproval colored every word. "This is where I live," I confirmed. "And before you say anything, it's affordable and close to work. It's a death trap." He stared up at the building like it personally offended him. "The lock on the front door is broken. There's no security, and half the windows don't even close properly." "How do you know about the windows?" He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I may have done a walkthrough when I found your address." "You broke into my apartment?" I should have been angrier, but mostly I was exhausted. I needed to know you were safe. He turned to me, cupping my face. "Promise me you'll think about moving somewhere better." "I'll think about it." A non-answer, but the best I could offer. He walked me to my door, his presence overwhelming in the narrow hallway. At my apartment, he waited while I unlocked it, then did his own security check, testing the locks, the windows, even looking under the bed like a concerned parent checking for monsters. "Dante, I've lived here for 2 years. I'm fine." "You were fine," he corrected. "Now you're mine to protect. That changes everything." Before I could argue, he pulled me close and kissed my forehead, a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. "Lock the door behind me. Call if you need anything." "I mean it, Mia." "Anything." Then he was gone, leaving me standing in my tiny apartment that suddenly felt emptier than ever before. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart racing, my mind spinning. What had I just agreed to? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every car passing on the street below, sent my heart racing. I kept replaying the evening in my mind. Dante's confessions, his touch, the barely leashed violence I'd sensed beneath his controlled exterior. Around 3 a.m, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should be sleeping, Angel." My breath caught. I typed back, "How do you know I'm not? Your light's been on for hours." I jumped up, rushing to my window and peering down at the street. A black SUV sat across from my building, engine idling, windows too dark to see inside. As I watched, the rear window rolled down just enough for me to see Dante's face in the shadows. He'd been watching me all night. I should have felt violated. Instead, some traitorous part of me felt safer knowing he was there. I grabbed my phone again. "Go home." "I'm fine. I am home. Anywhere you are is home." The words made my chest tighten. I texted back, "That's creepy, not romantic. Can it be both?" Despite everything, I smiled. There, a flash of the boy I'd known, the one who used to leave terrible poetry on my windshield and think he was being smooth. "Good night, Dante. Dream of me, Mia." I closed my curtains and crawled into bed, and somehow, knowing he was outside keeping watch, I finally fell asleep. The next morning at work, Rita pulled me aside before the morning rush. "That man from yesterday called, made a very generous donation to my daughter's college fund in exchange for understanding if you needed some time off." Her eyes were sharp, concerned. "Want to tell me what's going on?" It's complicated. Honey, men who throw money around like that are always complicated." She squeezed my shoulder. "Just be careful. I've lived in this city long enough to recognize power when I see it. And that man? He's got the kind of power that protects or destroys. Nothing in between." Her words haunted me through my shift. I kept expecting Dante to appear, but he didn't. Instead, around noon, a delivery arrived. A box wrapped in expensive paper, my name written in an elegant hand on the card. Inside was a new phone, top of the line, already activated, with one contact programmed in. Dante. The note read, "For our nightly calls, the other one isn't secure. D." I stared at it, torn between irritation at his presumption and reluctant appreciation for the practical gift. My current phone was ancient, the screen cracked, barely holding a charge. This one was sleek, new, probably cost more than a month's rent. I texted him from it. "You can't buy me." His response was immediate, "Not trying to buy you, trying to keep you safe. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Ask me in a month." Despite myself, I found myself smiling at the phone throughout my shift, rereading his messages, analyzing every word choice. I was pathetic. 7 years of silence and one dinner had me acting like a teenager with her first crush. But it wasn't a crush. It was something far more dangerous. The rekindling of a love I'd never fully extinguished, no matter how hard I'd tried. The week passed in a strange rhythm. I worked my shifts at the café, while Dante's presence orbited my life like a dark star. He didn't push, didn't demand more than our agreement allowed, but he was always there. Texts throughout the day, random observations, terrible jokes that reminded me of who he used to be, questions about what I was eating, if I was tired, if I needed anything, and every night, a phone call. His voice in the darkness, deep and intimate, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in two worlds, the legitimate business facade and the criminal reality underneath, about his mother, who died when he was young, about inheriting a legacy he'd tried to run from, only to be dragged back by blood and duty. I told him about the years after he'd left, the grief that had nearly swallowed me whole, the jobs I'd cycled through, trying to find purpose in a world that felt colorless without him, the walls I'd built to keep from ever feeling that abandoned again. "I'm sorry," he said one night, his voice rough with emotion, "for all of it, for leaving, for the pain I caused. If I could go back, but you can't," I interrupted gently. "None of us can. We can only decide what we do now." "And what do you want to do now, Angel?" The question hung between us, weighted with possibility. "I don't know yet. Ask me in 3 more weeks." His low laugh rumbled through the phone. "You're going to make me work for this. You're the head of a crime family. I thought you liked challenges, only when I know I'm going to win." "Confident, aren't you? About this? About you?" His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." By the second week, the texts became more frequent, the phone calls longer. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. Small fears, secret dreams, the loneliness that had become so constant I'd stopped noticing it. And he listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in years. But there were things he wouldn't discuss. When I asked about the specifics of his business, he deflected. When I pushed about the violence, the crimes, the reality of what he did, he changed the subject. It was like he was showing me carefully curated pieces of himself, while hiding the darkest parts. "You can't compartmentalize forever," I told him during one call. "If we're going to do this, I need to know all of you, not just the parts you think I can handle." Silence stretched between us. Then, "Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow. I'm trying to protect you from that burden. Maybe I don't want to be protected from reality. Maybe you should." His voice was tight, strained. "The things I've done, Mia, the orders I've given, the blood on my hands, that's not something I want you to carry. But you carry it. I have to. It's my inheritance, my responsibility. And if I choose to be part of your life, it becomes my responsibility too." I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling. "You can't have it both ways, Dante. Either I'm in this with you, really in it, or I'm just some kept woman you visit when you want to pretend you're normal. You're not." He stopped, taking a breath. "You're right. You deserve honesty. This weekend, come to my home. Let me show you my world, the real one. Then decide if you can live with what I am." Fear and anticipation warred in my chest. "Okay. I'll send a car Saturday morning. Pack an overnight bag. Dante?" "Separate rooms," he assured me. "Unless you decide otherwise, I'm not going to push you into anything you're not ready for." Saturday morning arrived too quickly. I packed a small bag, my hands shaking, second-guessing everything. A black car arrived at 9, not the SUV, but a sleek sedan with a driver who introduced himself as Marco and treated me with careful respect. We drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind, winding through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods, until we reached a gated estate that looked like something from a movie. High walls, security cameras, guards at the gate who waved us through immediately. The house, mansion, really, was stunning. Modern architecture blended with old-world elegance, surrounded by manicured gardens and what looked like acres of private land. Dante waited at the entrance, dressed casually in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. But but his eyes held tension as he watched me take in my surroundings. "Welcome home," he said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, welcome to my home." The slip didn't escape my notice. Neither did the hope in his eyes. He gave me a tour, room after room of understated luxury, artwork worth fortunes, every detail speaking of wealth and power. But what struck me most was how empty it felt. Beautiful, pristine, and utterly lifeless. "Do you live here alone?" I asked as we stood in a living room bigger than my entire apartment. "I have staff, security, but yes, essentially alone." He watched me carefully. "It's safer this way. Fewer people to worry about, fewer vulnerabilities. It's lonely." It was. He moved closer, his hand finding mine, until now. We had lunch on a terrace overlooking the gardens, food prepared by a chef I never saw, served by staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Throughout the meal, Dante's phone buzzed constantly. He ignored it at first, but the calls became more insistent. Finally, he checked it, his expression darkening. "I'm sorry. There's a situation I need to handle. Business that can't wait. It's fine. I understand." "No." He stood, frustration evident in every line of his body. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. My world intruding, demanding attention when I want to be with you. Dante, it's okay. Go handle it." He hesitated, then leaned down to kiss my forehead. "Stay here. Make yourself at home. I'll be back as soon as I can." He left, and I wandered the empty mansion, feeling like a ghost myself. I found his office, all dark wood and leather, with a view of the grounds. On his desk sat a single framed photo, partially hidden behind some files. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was us. 7 years ago, laughing at something, my head on his shoulder, his arms around me. We looked so young, so happy, so blissfully unaware of how everything would shatter. He'd kept it all these years. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Through everything, the violence, the power, the transformation into someone I barely recognized, he'd held on to this piece of us. This evidence that once, before the darkness, we'd been real. I was still staring at it when I heard voices outside the office. Dante's voice, low and deadly, speaking Italian. And another man, responding with equal intensity. The door burst open, and Dante strode in, followed by a man I'd never seen before. Older, scarred, radiating violence. Both men froze when they saw me. "Mia!" Dante's voice was sharp with alarm. "I told you to stay in the main house." I gestured helplessly at the photo. The other man's eyes went from me to the photo to Dante, and something like understanding crossed his scarred face. He said something in Italian, and Dante responded sharply, angrily. "Who is she?" the man asked in accented English, studying me with unnerving intensity. "None of your concern, Sal." Dante positioned himself between us, protective and possessive. "Everything about you is my concern, especially when you're making decisions with your heart instead of your head." Sal's gaze remained on me. "She's a weakness. Your enemies will see that. Then my enemies will learn what happens when they threaten what's mine." The promise in Dante's voice made my blood run cold. This was it. The reality I'd asked to see, the violence lurking beneath the expensive suits and gentle touches. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it after all. Sal left after a tense exchange in Italian that involved Dante literally stepping between us, his body language screaming danger. When the door finally closed, silence crashed over the room like a physical weight. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Dante said quietly, not turning around. "That's what you're sorry for? That I saw it?" I set the photo down carefully. "Not that it happened in the first place." He turned then, and the expression on his face was raw, unguarded. "Sal is my second. He's been with my family for 20 years, and he's loyal to a fault. But he's also right. You are a weakness. Every person in my organization will see it. Every enemy will try to exploit it. Then maybe we shouldn't... Don't." He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands framing my face. "Don't finish that sentence. I know what you're going to say, and the answer is no. I'm not letting you go. Not again." Not ever. You might not have a choice, I whispered. If being with me puts me in danger, puts you in danger, then I'll burn down anyone who tries to use you against me. The words were a vow, dark and absolute. I've spent 7 years building power, Mia. Not for wealth, not for status, but for this. For the ability to protect what's mine. And you're mine. You've always been mine. People aren't possessions, Dante. I know. His forehead pressed against mine. But you're not just people. You're the only good thing in my world. The only light in all this darkness. And I'm selfish enough, ruthless enough, to keep you even when I shouldn't. I should have pulled away. Should have been frightened by the intensity, the possessiveness, the barely controlled violence simmering beneath his words. But I'd asked for honesty, and this was it. Raw and terrible, and completely sincere. Show me the rest, I said instead. His eyes searched mine. What? You promised to show me your world, so show me. All of it. No more hiding the dark parts. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then something shifted in his expression. Resignation mixed with determination. Okay. But understand, once you see this, you can't unsee it. Once you know the truth, there's no going back to innocent. I stopped being innocent the day you disappeared. He took my hand and led me through the mansion, down a hallway I hadn't noticed before, to a door that required a fingerprint scanner. It opened onto stairs descending into what I assumed was a basement. The space below was vast, part office, part war room. Screens lined one wall showing security feeds from what looked like dozens of locations. Maps covered another wall, marked with symbols and notes in Italian. And in the center, a massive table surrounded by chairs, currently occupied by 4 men who stood immediately when we entered. Gentlemen, Dante said calmly, this is Mia. She's under my personal protection, which means she's under all of our protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Spread the word. The men nodded, their eyes curious but respectful. One by one, Dante introduced them. His inner circle, the people who ran different aspects of his operation. They spoke about shipments and territories, about rival families and political connections, about money laundering and protection rackets with the casual ease of discussing the weather. I stood beside Dante, his hand never leaving my lower back, and absorbed the reality of his world. This wasn't romanticized movie violence. This was business built on intimidation, on fear, on the willingness to hurt people who got in the way. And Dante orchestrated all of it with calm efficiency, making decisions that affected hundreds of lives, issuing orders that might result in violence, all while keeping me tucked against his side like I belonged there. After an hour, he dismissed them and led me back upstairs. We ended up in his bedroom, a massive space dominated by windows overlooking the gardens. He poured us both whiskey from a crystal decanter, his hand steady despite the tension radiating from him. Questions? He asked, handing me a glass. 1,000,000. I took a sip, the burn grounding me. But I'll start with one. Do you kill people? He didn't flinch from the directness. I've given orders that resulted in deaths. I've defended myself and my people with lethal force when necessary, but I don't kill indiscriminately, and I don't tolerate unnecessary violence from my people. That's a politician's answer. It's the truth. He met my eyes steadily. I'm not going to pretty it up for you, Mia. I've done terrible things. I'll probably do terrible things again. But I operate by a code. No civilians, no children, no unnecessary collateral damage. In my world, that makes me relatively honorable. The best of the worst. Exactly. He drained his glass. So now you know. This is what I am. This is the life I'm offering you. Beautiful prisons and blood money and the constant knowledge that people want me dead. Which means they'll want you dead too. I walked to the window, staring out at the manicured perfection of his grounds. Behind me, I could feel Dante's tension, his fear that I'd finally see too much and walk away. But the thing was, I'd already seen it. Seen the violence lurking beneath the surface, the ruthlessness required to survive in his world, the darkness that clung to him like a second skin. And beneath all of that, I'd also seen something else, the boy who'd kept my photo for 7 years, who watched me sleep from his car because he couldn't bear to be far away, who looked at me like I was salvation and damnation wrapped in one fragile package. "I need you to promise me something," I said, not turning around. "Anything." The word came without hesitation. "No lies, not ever. I don't care how ugly the truth is. I need you to give it to me straight." I turned to face him. "And you don't make decisions about my life without consulting me. Not about my job, my home, my safety. We discuss everything." Hope flickered in his eyes, cautious and fragile. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I'm terrified. I'm saying this is insane and reckless, and probably the worst decision I'll ever make." I crossed to him, setting down my glass. "But I'm also saying I've spent 7 years trying to forget you, and it didn't work. I'm saying that when you look at me, I still feel like the most important person in the world. And I'm saying that maybe, possibly, I want to try this. Really try it." His hands came up to frame my face, trembling slightly. "You mean it?" "On one condition." I placed my hands over his. "You have to let me in. All the way in. No more protecting me from the hard parts. If I'm going to be part of your world, I need to understand it. All of it. Even the darkest parts, especially those." I held his gaze. "Because I think you've been carrying them alone for too long. And maybe together, they won't be quite so heavy. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like our first kiss 7 years ago. That had been sweet, tentative, full of teenage uncertainty. This was claiming and desperation, and 7 years of grief compressed into a single moment." His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I went willingly, surrendering to the intensity that had always existed between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you," he whispered. "I never stopped. Not for a single day. I know." I smiled against his lips. "You kept the photo." "I kept everything." His thumb traced my lower lip. "Every memory, every moment, every word you ever said to me. I carried you through 7 years of hell, Mia. You were the only thing that kept me human. Then let me keep you human now." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "No more lone wolf routine. You have me now. Let me help carry the weight." Over the following weeks, Dante kept his promise. He showed me everything. The legitimate businesses that fronted his operations, the network of people who depended on him, the delicate balance of power that kept the city from descending into open warfare. I met his people, learned the hierarchy, began to understand the complex web of loyalty and fear that held his empire together. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried from the stress, from the knowledge of what his world entailed. There were moments I questioned everything, wondered if love was worth the cost of living in constant awareness of danger. But there were also mornings waking up in his arms, safe and cherished. Evenings spent in quiet conversation, learning who he'd become while sharing who I was now. Moments of laughter that reminded us both we were still, underneath everything, just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. 3 months after that first dinner, Dante asked me to move into the mansion. Not as a demand, but as a genuine question, respecting the autonomy I'd insisted on. "I want you here," he said, as we sat in the garden, my head on his shoulder. "But only if it's what you want. I won't trap you, Angel. I won't make you a prisoner, even a willing one." I thought about my tiny apartment, my exhausting job, the life I'd been living on autopilot. Then I thought about this, safety and luxury and a man who looked at me like I hung the stars. "Yes," I said simply, "but I want to work. Maybe not at the café, but something. I need purpose beyond being your girlfriend." "Wife," he corrected softly. "If you'll have me." "Not now. Not until you're ready. But someday. I want everything with you, Mia. Forever. This time." I turned to look at him, this dangerous, powerful man who somehow became gentle when he touched me. "Ask me again in a year. Let's make sure we can survive your world first." "Deal." He kissed my forehead, my nose, finally my lips. "I can be patient. I've already waited 7 years. What's one more?" But 3 months later, when he asked again, this time with a ring that had belonged to his mother, on one knee in the garden where we'd had that first conversation. I didn't make him wait. I said yes, because I'd learned that love wasn't about safety or certainty. It wasn't about making the smart choice or the easy one. It was about finding someone who saw every broken piece of you and chose to stay anyway. Someone who'd cross through hell to find you and would burn down the world to keep you. Dante was darkness and danger, violence and power. But he was also mine, and I was his. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The wedding was small, private, attended only by his most trusted people. I wore simple white and carried peonies. He wore a dark suit and looked at me like I was a miracle he didn't deserve, but would fight to keep anyway. I promise to protect you, he said during our vows, his voice rough with emotion, to cherish you, to stand between you and every darkness in this world. You're my light, Mia, my redemption, and I will spend every day of my life being worthy of you. I promise to see you, I replied, tears streaming down my face. All of you, the light and the dark, the monster and the man. I promise to stand beside you, to share your burdens, to remind you that even in the darkest empire, love can still grow. When he kissed me, sealing our vows, I tasted salt from both our tears. Behind us, his people applauded. These dangerous men who'd probably killed without hesitation, showing genuine happiness for their boss, finding something good in all the darkness. That night, in the bedroom we now shared, Dante held me close, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. No regrets? He asked quietly. A million, I admitted, but none about this. About you. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into mine. I don't deserve you. Probably not. I pressed a kiss to his jaw. But you're stuck with me anyway. For better or worse, remember? For better or worse. He agreed. Though with you, even the worst feels like better. Years later, when people asked how we met, we'd smile and say we were childhood sweethearts who found each other again. We never mentioned the 7 years apart, the violence, the empire built on blood and fear. But sometimes, late at night, Dante would hold me close and whisper, "Thank you for seeing past the monster." And I'd whisper back, "Thank you for letting me see the man," because that was the truth of us, a love forged in darkness, tempered by separation, and strong enough to survive the weight of his crown. He ruled his empire with an iron fist, but he held my heart with gentle hands, and in a world of shadows and violence, we'd found our own light, our own redemption, our own forever.